My purpose today is to introduce to you our recently developed risk assessment method. I will do this by way of an example to demonstrate its usefulness. This is not a training video, which of course will require more time with a focus on developing competency. Again, this is not that session. By this demonstration, I intend to highlight that this risk assessment method is useful for measuring compliance and predetermined standards, and useful for measuring how far off or how distant our operating reality is to those ideals. This method not only highlights riskier positions, but contains also a mechanism to treat and control problem risk elements, and to measure the effectiveness of those proposals on the overall risk. And with that, let's look at our demo risk assessment. This one is venue suitability of the Mawson Lakes Hotel in Adelaide for the 2025 YCon. We begin step 1 with a review of a simplified version of a conditions checklist sent from the National YFC coordinator to the host event team leader. There are many checklist requirements that determines if this venue is fit for purpose. We will focus on child safety elements related only to the accommodation. Our scenario is the Mawson Lakes Hotel offers 2 people to share double, queen, king size beds, or one each on twin single beds, plus maybe a double sofa bed option, with the condition of at least one adult is in each room of children. The CFC host area has agreed to position one non-working adult conference participant, coordinator, local member, to share each bedroom with unaccompanied YFC children under 18 and other adult YFC attendees. They're putting 4 to 6 in a room, and it's a potluck bed allocation. In step 2, we use the risk assessment matrix to appraise our information. There are 3 elements we are appraising: vulnerability, hazard, and exposure. Vulnerability is the person or cohort needing protection. Hazard is the threat, and exposure is about mixing opportunity of vulnerability to the hazard. And we appraise by tagging our information position with descriptors, which have a numeric score. Our descriptors are like risk placements for the information we are processing. There are 4 of them. Number 4 is unknown, means we have no information at all. 3 is incomplete, means our intelligence is limited, partial, or fragmented. Number 2 is emerging, means we have a developing situation. And 1 is known. It means we have all the information needed on the individual or cohort we are protecting or could be a potential threat. Through an averaging formula, the vulnerability, hazard, and exposure scores help us determine the detectability score and corresponding label. Detectability means becoming visible, a factor to help us anticipate this risk. The detectability, the severity of consequences, and the likelihood of an incident happening become multipliers to each other. And that's how we arrive at a risk rating. Now back to our venue risk assessment. Let's look first at the low risk scenario. What if we followed all the requirements of YFC ministry? No bed sharing, no mixing adults and children in the room, and all beds are comparative. Let's assess. The vulnerability of children will be 1, known, because they're children. The adult participants are not permitted in the same bedroom as unaccompanied children, and so therefore adults are not at risk. The hazard posed by Adults sharing the room with kids but not meant to be working with them is known because it's nil and there's no hazard, they're not there. And the exposure is also known. There's nil exposure. So the detectability then, using the averaging formula of 1 plus 1 plus 1, 3 divided by 3, then the detectability is known. It's 1. And we multiply this detectability score against the consequences, which is, consequences of abuse, which is what we are assessing. So the consequences are harmful. Number 3, the severity of those consequences, and the likelihood in this instance is remote. So 1 by 3 by 1 is how we arrive at a low risk assessment with a score of 3. What about the arrangement by the host CFC area? Let's consider the host area recommendation and how we arrived at a high risk assessment with a score of 24. Firstly, they did not follow all the YFC minister requirements. There's supposed to be no bed sharing, no mixing adults and children, and all beds are to be comparative. Instead, the CFC host area is fitting 4 to 6 persons in a room, one per available bed, maybe, if they follow the instruction, or maybe still 2 per bed if they didn't. And there will be others who will be on the floor, potluck, maybe in air mattresses. Okay, and there will still be 1 adult per room who is a non-working adult. Even if they have a working with children check, they're not there to work, they're participants. So let's assess. The vulnerability of children will be 1, known, because they're children. The hazard is 3, incomplete, because although they're YFC, we're uncertain how adults might act out, or even the children. And then the exposure is number 4, unknown, because we do not know how each child will react to the adult in the room and to being allotted an oversized bed or told to sleep on the floor. So you multiply the detectability, 3, incomplete, and consequences, which is 3, harmful, and the likelihood of 2 being possible. So 3 by 3 by 2 is how we arrived at a high risk assessment with a score of 18 for the children. And then we look at the adult YFC participants and their risk assessment and how it became 24 high risk. And here's how. The vulnerability of adults at risk, the adults YFC placed in each bedroom. Number 2 is emerging. Look, they're supposed to be participants with no responsibility towards children, no child minding responsibility. And the hazard posed by adults sharing the room with kids who are not meant to be working with them. So that's unknown because they have not agreed to this responsibility. And particularly, the responsibility transferred by Mawson Lakes Hotel onto the adult in the room. Remember, that was a condition by the hotel. Okay, so we don't know how they might behave also if they access alcohol, and we'll get back to that later. What about the exposure? If the adult leaves the children unattended, will it be neglect? Or a child discloses that the adult saw them changing or change in front of them? Will there be an issue of abuse or grooming? Or what if they just might not get along? Again, the risk is, again, what is the risk that Mawson Lakes Hotel is transferring to the adult required to be in each bedroom? So exposure is 3, incomplete. It's an incomplete picture. Nothing may happen, but something may happen. And so the detectability is also 3. It's incomplete. Now the consequences has to go up to extreme because it's always an extreme consequence if somebody accuses you of neglect or abuse, right? And in the next 50 years, we're supposed to keep records, right? So that people who then are accusing of historic abuse. So You multiply the detectability of 3 incomplete times consequences, which is 4 extreme, and the likelihood of 2 possible. 3 times 4 times 2 is how we arrived at a high risk assessment with a score of 24. Now, the risk assessment matrix guides the community with what to do next in step 3. For low to medium risk assessments, the event head can improve and accept the risk. But for higher risk, the event or project ought to be aborted unless the authorized decisioner approves it. The conditions of approval are documents supporting the decision. Since no one is infallible but the Pope, and even then limited, the authorized decisioner is informed by the co-discernment of the key events stakeholders before deciding to override the default position of aborting the project or risk item being assessed as high risk. The key documents required by the authorized decisioner overriding a high risk assessment includes a CFC risk treatment plan. This is a plan outlining how risk will be eliminated, controlled, or managed. And the authorized decisioner ought to have documented endorsements from event team and key stakeholders uh, uh, as to the thoroughness and the applicability of this plan. Now, what are some related scenarios regarding this venue? Now, we haven't even looked at other related scenarios. What if we had not booked out all the rooms on the floor? What if the available rooms next to children or adult participants are occupied by outsider guests who swear loudly, have sex loudly, play loud music, or participate in antisocial behavior? If an adult YFC acted out to enter the bar or gaming area, um, what if they get tipsy on alcohol? They wander for walks around the lake or do a Macas run, or uh, a YFC member or an adult or child is not feeling well and would like to rest in their room, mid conference. Or a YFC member has her period and would like to access her belongings in private. She would then feel forced to reveal her private reason to the guard or to the coordinator and was made to feel embarrassed. So a YFC coordinator then is tasked to coordinate but is burdened with excessive child minding responsibilities. Or during adoration or some reflection, pub music is playing in the background. It is a Friday, Saturday. How would welfare checking work as they exit the conference hall, cross the road, or walk around the block to access their accommodation? It seems like a busy picture, and it's distracting for a conference for youth compared to traditional conference and retreat venues. So the risk treatment plan is not just a patch-up document to bury the risk identified. It must actually be carried out and prove practical and applicable to attain the objectives of the risk assessment. All accountable stakeholders acknowledges the raw and residual risk assessment and risk treatment plan and either endorses or opposes it as their recommendation to their followership and to the authorized decisioner. No leader with an impacted followership can just sit on the fence of a high risk assessed event. They have 4 courses of action. They can reject the treatment plan, recommend it to abort it. They can endorse the treatment plan because they're happy. They can endorse the treatment plan with conditions. They can return the treatment plan for further review with or without risk control suggestions. If you were the area leader for the other states and territories, would you endorse Mawson Lakes Hotel for 2025 YCon? Lastly, just a final commentary. This risk assessment method is scalable and it can be calibrated and is comparatively simple to teach and to apply. This risk assessment method can be applied to scale. It can be applied to games and activities, venues and catering, meetings and conferences. Um, Like I said, it can be calibrated or adjusted to emphasize weighting of some risk over others. And this risk assessment method have comparatively simple concepts, calculations, and straightforward full cycle processes. So lastly, the 13 conditions which are separately risk assessed in the document Risk Safety Planning for Children and Adults at Risk Attending CFC Community Coordinated Events are conditions prescribed in the National Catholic Safeguarding Standards, which means that they were they were legal standards in at least one state or territory and federally.